Thank you for tuning in to the Muffed Punt podcast. My name is Brandon, and I am joined by Ralph. How are we doing tonight, Ralph?
Doing fine, Brandon. Thanks for having me.
I'm super happy that you are here. We've been trying to get this together for quite some time, so I'm definitely excited to start off a new podcast realm in the sports world. We've had one podcast a long time ago with my buddy Paul, but we're back here with my buddy Ralph. Paul will be joining us in another episode, but we're just definitely super excited to finally get things started because we love sports so dang much that we just wanted to sit down and talk about it, record that conversation, and bring it to the masses. Are you excited?
Man, we've been talking about this for how long now, and it's finally coming to fruition here, and it's good to be with you and talk sports because as you know and everything, we've talked sports pretty much from the very first time I met you, and that's what we bonded over, and this is what we enjoy.
Definitely. So we're going to start things off with what I think is the biggest story of the offseason for baseball, which is the Astros cheating scandal. Unless you've been living under a rock for the last several months, I don't think there's any way that you don't know something about this scandal already. It's pretty crazy because for once we're not talking about the Yankees being involved, or we had the little bit with the Apple Watches with the Red Sox. I mean, it's just, this is like we're taking it to whole new levels.
Yeah, no, certainly. And it's one of those things, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. But at the same time, what these guys did and the level to which they did it and the longevity apparently is really shameful. It should be punished way heavier than what it's been punished.
So that's what we're going to get into a little bit. And just in case you don't know the details, basically it breaks down to there was a camera out in center field that the Astros had installed in their stadium that would go down to a monitor that was just outside of the dugout, essentially. And if they had a program that they would be able to use, an algorithm that, how many times with catchers they'll throw down multiple signs, and it's between the catcher and the pitcher as to which one of those signs is going to be the hot sign, which one's the real sign. But this algorithm could break that. And it was called Code Breaker even. And so they would use that to relay it through the algorithm. The algorithm would tell them which pitch was the real pitch, and then they would bang on a trash can to let the batter know at the plate what it was. 1 for fastball, 2 for off speed. So you'd have a really good idea, pitch by pitch, what was coming at you at home. And that's basically what it breaks down to.
Right. And these guys are professional ball players. How long have they been doing this? And for them to have any kind of advantage over another player, another team, it really speaks to, I guess, the world that we live in now and technology and, gaining that little bit of an advantage. But that little bit of an advantage can mean, ask the Dodgers what it means. To the Dodgers, it means a World Series championship. And in my opinion, again, like you said, we'll get to this a little bit more, but it should be definitely harsher penalty for what they did. I mean, cheating in sports, you're taught from being 5 years old, peewee, that cheating is wrong. And here we are at the highest of highest levels in the major leagues, and having them steal signs and gaining that that unfair advantage to, if I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, but if somebody told me a fastball is coming, you have such an advantage over that. Pitching is such an art form. You can in, out, up, down, fast, slow, off speed, curveball. If you have any kind of idea of what's coming, your chances of hitting that ball are so much higher. If you look at their splits home and away, they were amazingly different.
Other than Altuve, I believe, was actually better away than he was at home.
Was he?
Yeah, but other than him, everyone else had splits in that direction. And plus, I think the main things that to me are the most really tough things to have to ponder about this are twofold. One is it's very similar to the steroid era in that if you cheat for a season, say, right, and you have good stats and it happens to be a contract year for you, that is literally millions upon millions of dollars more potentially that you could bring home in the long run than what you would get otherwise. You could essentially compare it to juicing for one season, right? In your contract year, you get caught, sorry, but you still get that contract.
Right. Your name's on the contract.
Exactly. So then there's your millions of dollars. And yeah, you know what? You did one thing wrong, but you get to walk away with a whole lot of money for doing it.
You sure do.
And then you have to look at the other side where you have guys who I forget the guy's name right now, but there was the gentleman who's suing them right now because he was coming up from the minors. He got one game. He got to face the Astros, got destroyed, and then he retired right after that. So it's like you literally are destroying people's careers in some aspect of this. You also are you're skewing the system for the potential of you eating up so many more millions of dollars of a franchise's amount of money that they can throw out there every year. And then you could have a situation like a Ryan Braun, where it's like that guy's half of what he used to be. You're not cranking out 50 home runs a year anymore because he's not on the juice. So now it's tough to say, like, okay, where do we go to clean this up from here? And that's where I want to run into this is like, we know now that Rob Manfred, the commish of the MLB, basically gave the players the latitude to say, hey, if you snitch on everybody else, nobody's going to get in trouble as far as players go, but we're going to go after the owners and the GMs and all those guys and the managers of the team, but we'll give the players amnesty. And I think that's probably been one of the largest points of contention in all of this, because you have guys like Alex Bregman who have almost done a heel turn in the grand scheme of things. And that's kind of one of the points that I wanted to bring to you is like, we'll start first with like, how do you feel about with the punishments? Two is there's part of me that kind of doesn't mind the heel turn. I kind of think it's like fun for baseball. Like if you're going to go any way with this, why not embrace it and be like, we're the bad boys of baseball? But go ahead.
So I'll speak first to the steroid use versus the sign stealing. And juicing can only get you so much. Juicing can make you hit the ball farther, but you got to hit it. You still have to know where that ball's coming, and you still have to see it. And these guys, like I said, had the unfair advantage of knowing maybe not exactly where the pitch was coming from, but what kind of pitch is coming, and that's a huge advantage. And if you add juicing on top of it, then Bonds probably could have hit 85 home runs that year. Now, as far as the punishment goes and the players and the amnesty, look, everybody that was in there, from what I understand, Bregman and Altuve and those guys, and some of the younger guys coming up, it was just the way things were done, And if you're a young kid coming up into the big leagues, you want to stay in the big leagues, and you don't want to piss anybody off, and you don't want to hurt your chances of staying with the team. So what are you going to do? You're going to shut up, or are you going to
do you want to get blackballed by baseball because you're the one guy that came up and spoke out against the team, and then you get guys like Big Papi and all those calling you a snitch like they're doing with Mike Fiers? So it's tough because if you're brand new to this, you could essentially make yourself the black sheep of baseball, and you're never going to get another offer for another team.
Exactly. And Mike Fiers, I give him a hell of a lot of credit because that took a lot of guts. I don't know his reasoning behind it, whether it was his conscience got the best of him or whatever the case may be. But for him to come out and break this story, basically, and turn baseball upside down for at least part of the season or a season or further, who knows, is commendable in my opinion.
It's something had to happen as bad blood between him and the Astros organization as he was on his way out, because he's on the Oakland A's now.
Correct.
And I feel like there had to be something that made him want to burn that bridge when he left.
Yeah, it seems like he set that on fire and watched it burn.
And it's been really interesting to get to watch guys like Trevor Bauer and different guys come forward on Twitter and really talk about their feelings and all of this. I feel like baseball is one of the few sports that the stars of the sport are not super vocal on things that are detrimental to the sport. Like, you so rarely see guys in baseball come out and say that they disagree with the commissioner this adamantly. So it's interesting to see so many players coming forward and being like, I don't agree with this. Something needs to be done to fix this. But in that same respect, I wonder, and I kind of pose to you, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying sort of deal. Imagine this is a much larger problem, if you will, and that, if we were to say that most teams were doing some version of this. We know that the Red Sox had a system to essentially say that if there was a guy on second base, they would relay the sign to him, or it would be his job to try to break it, and then relay that to the batter, whether it be to look to the right or look to the left, or I'm going to kind of squat down or
right,
what have you. To be very honest with you, I don't really have too much of a problem with that. If you got a guy on second and you're smart enough to break that, that's on you.
On the field and doing it with your mind.
Yes.
It's almost like card counting. If you can count cards, good for you. I mean, get the money. And if you're on the field and you can pick up on certain things, I mean, it's been done for years. How could it not be done for years?
And that's why I don't have a problem with that specifically. Now, because teams can counter that, just like the Nationals did when they played the Astros, and they literally were in like a batter by batter changing what the hot sign was, so that even if the code breaker got them, not that they knew that to the extent of it, I'm sure at that time, but they were literally changing it up at every batter. And I mean, it goes to show how much, really that much of a difference it made in the long run. I mean, I made jokes last year that it was kind of like the baseball gods karmically sent the Nationals to kill the Astros. So it's sometimes you have that where it's like sweet justice, if you will, because it happens to come back to bite you. And I have a hard time believing that after 2017, you got all the way to the big show and you got the trophy, or the big hunk of metal, as the commissioner was calling it, that you're going to stop after that. Why would you stop after that?
Right. You got a taste, and you want to keep going back, and you want to keep doing everything in your power to stay on top.
And I think what's also very interesting to me about this is the whole AJ Hinch angle. So you're the manager of the team, you find out your team's doing this, and this is what he's kind of posing as what happened. And then he had like a temper tantrum where he smashed the monitors that they were using for the camera in the outfield. And then they got new monitors. And then he just kind of never said anything else about it again after that we know of.
Right.
So it's like, how as a manager are you okay with that, for one? Because you know at some point this is going to come back. You know it has to. Like, that was what would eat at me and not let me sleep at night, because I wouldn't think that there's that guy like Mike Fiers that's out there that's going to blow this whole thing wide open. So it's like, how do you get through that as a manager to not put your foot down and say this ends today?
Well, when you're 51-21 or whatever their record may have been at that time, maybe you let things go a little bit.
Or do you think that it was so prevalent? They felt it was so prevalent in the game already. Like, why, if everyone else is doing this, we're just going to keep doing this till the wheels fall off.
And that's, that speaks to, a larger problem in baseball probably. And who knows what we're going to come to find out here in the next year or so. And more people like Mike Fiers might get their heart broken a little bit by a team that lets them go, or designated for assignment, or something gets cut, sent to the minor leagues for a game because they weren't pitching right, or something along those lines. And then out of the, here comes the next story of somebody cheating or throwing signs or in some way, shape, or form cheating. And that's what we're going to be looking forward to here.
So how much stock do you put into the whole buzzer talk? What do you think are the chances that Altuve had on a buzzer at that last at bat where he cracked out that home run, and then he runs around third and he's like, "Don't rip off my shirt,
right?
Don't rip off my shirt." It's a little weird.
It's very weird, and he claims that he didn't want his tattoo to show because it was an unfinished tattoo.
Did you happen to see the Twitter investigation, the internet sleuthing that went on to try to find out about this tattoo?
No, but I did see like a lineup of like half-naked dudes from the baseball team, and they were like, "Look, no tattoo." And then somebody said at the beginning of spring training that Altuve came in shirtless with the tattoo actually finished to say, "Look, I've got the tattoo." That video, that little GIF, whatever you want to call it, of him rounding third and winning that series in game 6, right?
It was 6 or 7.
Is pretty compelling. It's pretty compelling for him to hold it, and then he runs to the dugout.
That's the part that to me was odd. He ran to the dugout, changed his shirt, and then came back onto the field, changed way away from where anybody could see what the hell he was doing.
After just hitting a walk-off home run on your home field against the Yankees, you're not gonna run to the dugout. You're not gonna run and go change. You're gonna stay right on that field and celebrate like an animal.
I loved what Gary Sanchez said. He's like, "Man, if I do that, you can rip my pants off. I don't care." So, it's tough to me to think about, because I feel like if it goes into the fact that they actually had electronics on their body, you have to at that point suspend players.
To me, players should have been suspended already. They should have been suspended. They should have been punished. Then a status or a benchmark should have been set by this. We're not going to take it. If you cheat, especially to this level, you're going to be suspended. It's PEDs. It's, that level of we don't want you. You got a guy like Pete Rose with over 4,000 hits and not in the Hall of Fame because he bet on himself. And yet these guys cheated and stole games and stole a World Series, if you will, and they don't get anything.
So here's the other two things that are interesting from this. One is there are fans who are season ticket holders that are now suing the Astros for essentially putting illegitimate product out on the field.
I have not heard that, but I'd like to buy a ticket.
Why? If I was a season ticket holder, I would think about it. I spent how many thousands of dollars on tickets to go to games, and then I find out that you were cheating. So you are essentially and all of this is for nothing now. Like none of it makes any difference anymore because the trophy's tainted. So if that's the case and you're an Astros fan, do you not feel like you were gypped out of something? Like we're both Phillies fans.
Correct.
Going to go to the games, like it's not cheap to go there.
No, it's not.
So, and especially if I was a season ticket holder where I'm dropping down at least $1,000 or more, because not everybody gets the whole season. Some people split it up between several people.
Right.
But if you're spending all that money, I would feel gypped.
I can see that. I can see your point about feeling gypped. I don't think they have a case. I don't think there's no way in hell that any judge or any jury or whatever is going to give them any kind of money for this. I think nice try. And if I were them, I mean, hey, it's worth a shot. But yeah. I just don't think it's going to go anywhere.
I mean, if you got deep pockets, you might as well give it a shot, right?
Right.
I think one of the best ways to wrap up this conversation as far as with the Astros is, do you feel like that at this point that just having the asterisk next to the trophy is enough? Because if you are a common everyday baseball fan, you have a good idea as to what happened here and you know that this is wrong. Or do you feel like it's enough that they need to vacate that trophy and we literally forever know that there was no winner that year? Because that's the only way I feel like you can do it. Or third, do you have them vacate it and do you give it to the runner-up?
Here's my thought on this. With PEDs, with Barry Bonds, there's a baseball in the Hall of Fame with the asterisks cut out. I've seen it. I've been to the Hall of Fame. It's a really compelling piece, and to be in the Hall of Fame with that little cutout is pretty damning. But it's representative of a certain period of time in baseball. If you're going to, I don't think you can necessarily vacate the title. I think it's kind of like PEDs. You just have to be, this is kind of what it is. This is what it was. This is what happened. And there's no way that they're going to vacate it and or give it to the Dodgers. If they vacated that trophy, I think it would send a message. I kind of wish that they would have, because I think then that sets the bar and that sets the tone and that sets the pace for teams in years to come that cheat, get caught, and you don't have a championship.
That's how I feel like it should happen. I get the asterisk part. That's great. But you could still argue you're still getting that spot in the Hall of Fame. You're still having some kind of recognition for what you did. And I very much agree. Like, I'm definitely the type of person that feels like we should learn from history and we need to not forget the terrible things that have happened in history.
Right.
Because if we don't remember those things, we don't learn from them. So I get all that. In the same respect, though, if you are going to give the players amnesty, that is the punishment you can deal down that affects all of them. So I think that, to me, would have been, if I was the commish, fine, give them amnesty, but I'm taking that trophy.
Right. But do one, do the other, but do something. Don't just fine the team $5 million. I mean, that's like fining you $20.
But that fine is agreed upon by the owners.
Right.
So they're not going to agree to fine themselves some outrageous amount of money.
Of course not, because they're all in it together. They all make money together. They all revenue share, and that's their moneymaker. They don't care. They don't care if they cheat. In the end, it matters about butts and seats and beer sales and hot dog sales and merchandise and, jerseys and everything else. I mean, that's what makes them money.
So speaking of that, how do you think that this is going to affect all of those things? Do you think that this taints baseball enough that we get less butts in the seats this year, that we get less people tuning in to see what happens?
I think baseball's got a problem overall. Obviously, there's always been talk about how long games are, time in between pitches, and now you've got, the relief pitchers have to face at least 3 batters, and they're changing the game to speed it up and to try to not lose people and not lose butts and seats. But I think getting back to what you said about the heel turn, that's I don't want to say it's a Donald Trump mentality, but you've got these guys that now they're becoming the only way that they're popular or gain any kind of recognition is to be that and to be a heel and to be the WWE superstar that the Hulk Hogan that turns and becomes NWO. I mean, these major heel turns. Mike Trout, the guy is the greatest baseball player on the planet, and they say that he doesn't do enough to promote baseball.
Now, see, that's one of the things that I was going to mention from this is that's where I feel like that they're failing the game of baseball is, and it's not just with Mike, because obviously we have an affinity for Mike being from the same town that Mike's from. Mm-hmm. I just feel like if you are not marketing your players correctly, then this is what happens. You have stories in baseball of players that come from amazing backgrounds as far as like the story that you could get from that and the story that you could tell, the compellingness of those life things that those people have been through.
Right.
So why not tell people about that stuff? Why not market those things? Why not have that out there where, like Mike's situation with his dad, like his dad got so far, but then Mike blew the doors off.
Blew him away.
That's an amazing story. Mm-hmm. Nobody knows that unless you know about him from this town.
Right.
Like, it's crazy to me that they don't market their players. And that's where I feel like is the biggest problem with MLB across the board is they do not make these players into superstars. You watch with basketball, you watch with football, like household names these guys become. Like everybody knows about Tom Brady. Like even if you don't know jack about football, you know who Tom Brady is.
Number 199.
Exactly. Do you know how many so in my business, I'm not going to say what I do for a living, but I take phone calls. And when I get those phone calls, a lot of times people will go, "Hey, where are you from?" And I'll say, "Well, if you're a baseball fan, I'm from the same town as Mike Trout." Do you know how many times people know who that is? Zero.
Wow.
Like I think I've maybe run into one time that I ran into somebody that was like, "Oh yeah, he's awesome." Other than that, no one knows who he is, who does not watch baseball. So it's like the guy's had 8 postseason at bats?
Right.
So it's tough for me to say that speeding up the game is what's going to fix it. I'm that old man going to scream from my porch because I think it's ridiculous that you're going to change the game for 4 minutes.
And I'm the same way. I feel the exact same way. Keep it the way it was. I mean, I was just talking today, or actually yesterday, to my dad, and the Phillies game was on yesterday at my sister's house, and it's on in the background, and it's just the sound of the baseball announcers, the sound of the crowd, the sound of the bat hitting the ball, and that crack, and it just takes me back to when I was a kid and watching it at my grandmom's house or listening to Harry Callis. I mean, Harry Callis was my childhood. When he died, it was like losing a family member almost, because that's how much time I spent with him over, throughout my childhood and my adolescence and then my adult life. And it's like losing a family member. But that's baseball to me. Baseball, I don't need it to be 2.5 hours every game. It's the nuances and the chess match, and that's the beauty of baseball to me.
Absolutely, 100% agree. And if you have people that are going to sit their butts in the seat for football, and we can already say that's the most popular sport in the United States, bar none, right now is football.
Right.
And how long are those games?
3 hours.
Thank you.
Yep.
So if you're going to sit there for that, you're clearly you have the capability, which I feel like a lot of people, they feel like people don't have patience anymore. They don't have the wherewithal mentally to sit down for that amount of time. I'm a huge baseball fan. I will watch games almost every single day of the season. And I watch teams that are not even my own team the vast majority of the time because I just love that, like you were describing, the sounds of the game, the pennant race, all the different things that go into what make baseball baseball. I love those things. And you know what? Not every game is going to be lights out exciting. I also am a huge MMA fan, and there are times where those fights are excruciatingly boring.
Right.
And it's a fight,
right.
Like a literal fist fight between two guys, and they're boring.
Right.
So you have to understand the nuances of those sports to not get bored or understand that sometimes those things happen.
And it's part of the sport.
Yep.
That is the sport. The sport of it is the chess match. The sport of it is who can get the runs in, who can play small ball. It's not always about the long ball. It's not always about scoring 10, 15 runs. There's going to be games where it's a 0-0 tie going into the bottom of the ninth. And to me, that's what makes baseball fun. And the drama of it, because then it becomes who's going to win? How's it going to happen? Who's going to be the hero? Who's going to step up? to me, that's what makes baseball fun.
Yeah, it's the story of the game, and I think that that's where you can really go so far with it. So, I mean, I really have my fingers crossed that this isn't going to be a super detrimental thing to the sport, and I hope that they can get past it sooner than later. But we need to do something to make sure that this is something that doesn't continue from here on out. And I'm interested to see how much more we find out about the Red Sox down the road.
Mm-hmm.
But as of right now, it would seem to me that is not nearly as egregious as to what happened with the whole Astros thing. And I just have a really hard time believing that after 2017 that they hung that up and they just played it straight up from there on out.
Highly doubt it.
All right, another thing in the world of baseball in the offseason, Mookie Betts is on the move. Now, I think it's interesting to see an organization like the Red Sox that just won recently, and that they probably are one of the franchises in baseball that have more money than probably God. And you wonder kind of like when you have a player like this who is arguably a top 5 talent in baseball, who is arguably, if they stay healthy, a Hall of Famer, could obtain that in their career easily, I think. When you have that type of player, to send him off in his prime because you don't want to pay the money is really tough situation, I think, for them to be in. But when you play the system with your franchise where you're paying to get the title, this is what you run into.
Yeah, I was thinking about this earlier today before coming over and doing this with you. The Red Sox seem to know when to get rid of people. Johnny Damon, Pedro. I'm sure there are others that aren't coming to mind right now, but they seem to know when to cut the ties. So is this that case, or are they trying to save money? Is it a little bit of both? I'm not really sure, but if you go back to in our fandom in the Phillies, is what if the Phillies would have cut loose Jimmy Rollins or Ryan Howard before they deteriorated into the shell of their former self, and I think that as a fan and as a team and ownership, having that love for somebody, which we love those guys, we do. I still love them to this day. They brought us a championship, but did they hold on to them too long? To me, that comes to mind with Mookie is, are they cutting him, letting him go so that way they can get away from his high dollar contract, or do they see or know something that maybe we don't yet?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think with them offloading both Mookie and David Price at the same time, I think it has to be cap related because they're trying to get underneath the luxury tax.
Right.
Because that would have been, I believe, their third year. So you're moving up into like the very above 50% tax range, definitely. So that's a lot of money that's going to be coming out of your pocket. Now, what's interesting to me, though, is I think that they would probably make most of that money in hat sales, in jersey sales, in concessions, especially if you make it into the postseason, which I think arguably you could say now might not happen.
Right.
So why would you not be willing to sacrifice that? I mean, you get guys like Jerry Jones that say all the time, you would have no idea the check that I would write to get me another championship. If you are that franchise and you're staring that potentiality in the face, why do you let that go? Other than just to sit, do you really think you're going to be able to reload that quickly? I mean, guys like this, like Mookie, don't come around every day.
Correct. No, and that's the thing. I mean, and again, they obviously the cap has to play a role. But from my perspective, again, I feel like they always seem to cut the player at the right time. And from a Dodgers perspective, the Dodgers, I hate the saying, but the rich get richer. This has such a pain for me to watch the Dodgers do this. And I'll tell you why. You look at the Phillies and their scouting staff, and how many homegrown talent players do we have right now? Aaron Nola, Rhys Hoskins. I can't think of much more beyond that. Real Muto came from somewhere else. Harper obviously came from somewhere else. Nick Pivetta is not really lighting the world on fire. But then you look at the Dodgers and all of their homegrown talent. Kershaw and Jock Peterson, who was apparently going to be traded.
Well, yeah, but not any longer.
Right. And you have, I think I saw a stat where they had last year in the playoffs, 16 of 25 players were homegrown talent. The next closest was 13. I forget who the second place team was. I don't think it was Cardinals were third, and they had like 10 or 12 players that were homegrown. So the Dodgers are able to do these kind of moves because they have the farm system and they have the scouting and they have the stocked cupboard, so to say, so that way they can pull a trade off like this and get a Mookie Betts for, I don't know, I bet you they're going to be good in a couple years because the Dodgers seem to have a great talent system and a great talent evaluator to keep these things coming. I feel like the Dodgers are rich from top to bottom, players and evaluators.
When Clayton Kershaw is going to be arguably your third best starter on your roster, yes, I 100% agree. And I mean, it's theirs to lose this year. I feel like for sure it's going to be between them and the Yankees this year to see who's going to lose it. It's theirs to win and take, and so it's only up to them to not, follow through on it. Imagine this scenario, if you will. Mookie's going to be a free agent soon. So what if you, as the Red Sox, got to reset your tax, and then Mookie tests the market and you sign Mookie and bring him back to Boston?
If that's the plan, they're smarter than I am because, it sounds good in theory and
Sure.
it's possible. It's possible. But, from what I see, he's gonna fall in love with L.A. I mean, a lot of people, that's a nice place to live.
How many times have guys went and tested the waters in other places and never came back?
That's
true.
true.
It happens all the time in sports.
Right.
So I feel like it's going to be really tough when you have such a large possibility to market yourself and to do other things outside of baseball, even though that's potential distractions. But Mookie has a chance now to be that household name, and he has that platform in which to launch himself off of. So I feel like it's going to be hard for him to want to give up the palm trees and the glitz and the glamour to want to go back to cold-ass Boston.
Yeah, I totally agree. And L.A. and like you said, the glitz and the glamour and the good weather and their state tax is a little high.
That's true.
So he would be losing a lot of money there, but I don't know if he would ever, after this, maybe go back to Boston.
And also with this, the Twins get Kenta Maeda, which I think is going to be a pretty good little upstart for them to have some more oomph in their starting lineup for sure. The Twins have been a nice little surprise over the last couple of years, so it's been fun to watch, smaller city teams getting together and really like doing something. So off of that, I want to ask you this. So we've seen this proposed new playoff system for baseball that might be coming up for us. Now, we realize that I'm pretty sure they want to add teams to the overall amount of teams that we have in the near future. I think Seattle, Montreal, they've talked about some different possibilities. I'd love to see the Expos come back personally. If you do that, then if they then add 2 more teams to each side of the race, and then you extend out the wild card game or wild card series to a 3-game series, it's interesting. The part of it I don't like in the new proposal is that the team who has the best record gets to pick who they play against.
That I have not heard. So if you want to, can you explain a little bit more of this?
Yeah, so if you win your division, the team that would come out of the wild card round, the 2 teams, you get to pick which one of those 2 teams you want to play.
So it wouldn't just be low seed or...
Exactly.
I gotcha.
It's your choice.
Wow.
I would never want to do that.
No.
I would always want to be the team that comes from the wild card that gets picked because you have all that motivation to go kick somebody's butt now.
Of course. It's like in the NFL where, if you're the number 1 seed and as you're a fan of, say, this year, the Chiefs and as a Chiefs fan, somebody says, well, who do you want to play? Do you want to play this team or this team in the wild card, whoever those wild card teams were? You don't want to play either one because there's a chance that
you don't
one
want
of
to
them
say that you want to play either one. Yeah,
you don't want to start a fire.
Yeah, it's what is it? You don't want to have your mouth write checks that your butt can't cash.
Exactly.
It's tough, man. So I like having more teams in baseball. I'm fine with that. I think it's really tough when you have a 3-game wild card series because then your head division guys, if their ace pitches in the last week of the season, he's likely going to have 10 days off or more before his start in the playoffs, and that's really going to not be a great situation for them. If you know anything about baseball, these guys are sticklers for schedules. You are already potentially putting that better team at a detriment. So I think it's tough because there's parts of it that I like, but I feel like the vast majority of this is just something being proposed by TV executives to try to make more money.
Make more money. And like we were talking earlier, if you're worried about the game and you're worried about the status of the game and making sure that butts are in seats and the popularity of the game, don't dilute it.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's, to me, it's the tough thing because with the 3-pitcher rule, Are we going to be in the World Series? You walk a guy hits a double, and then you got to leave him on to face the next guy. Like, we're talking about the game over potentially at that point, and we're going to do that because of a stupid rule. And I that drives me nuts. Now, I know that you can face 3 guys and say you walk one of the 3, and then you bring in another guy, and then that guy ends the inning. That guy does not have to come back out and face 2 more people.
Right.
So that's okay. I like that. At least there's some stipulations to it a little bit. But I feel like the rule as a whole is stupid.
And I feel like the strategy that we're so used to seeing in baseball is being taken away by this rule.
I feel like that's part of, like, you're taking away part of a manager's job. You're taking away a part of his ability to dictate that game.
Right.
And I feel like that's part of, for me, the fun of baseball. It's why I love guys like Joe Madden. It's so much fun to watch how he can handle his players, and he knows who to tap to go in there and make big moments. And it's like, if you are taking that potentiality out of these guys' hand, you're just diminishing the sport of baseball.
I agree. Do you think Joe Madden's going to do wonders with the Angels? I mean, with a guy like Mike Trout, obviously, and now they have Rendon and who's the guy that was out with Tommy John last year?
Shohei,
yeah. I mean, I feel like that team, has, with the right manager, that those guys have a chance to surprise some people. Maybe not surprise. I don't want to say surprise. You can't surprise people with Mike Trout. But I think that they've underachieved grossly in the last several years.
Yeah.
And I think a guy like Madden can really maybe be the difference maker for them.
I think it's something to have a guy that can come into the clubhouse and immediately that this guy knows what he's talking about.
Yes.
I think the hardest part with Joe is I feel like his shtick wears thin after a while with his players.
As we've seen.
Yeah. So I love Joe. I feel like if I was a player myself that I would be like all about Joe Madden. But it's tough for me because I feel like with that organization, the biggest issue is the bullpen and the starting lineup, the starting rotation. Now, they have arguably 2 guys that could be decent in the top of that rotation. I personally would love to see Shohei show out and really just be awesome at baseball. But I know a lot of people have their doubts that he can stay healthy. And I think that's going to be, I think that's the big question, but there's so much a part of me that wants to see a pitcher that can hit like that just really succeed at this. So I got my fingers crossed. Yeah, for sure. So do I think it's possible? Yeah, totally. Could he pull the best out of that starting rotation and out of that bullpen and really know how to manipulate those pieces? Yes. Do I feel like it'll be a possible long-term solution? But will it get them back into the playoffs? Yes, I do think it will.
That's what I feel too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of getting back into the playoffs, our hometown team, the Philadelphia Phillies, have been struggling to get back in there as of late. And we made some moves in the offseason, jettisoning Gabe Kepler out to the San Francisco Giants and bringing in former Yankees manager Joe Girardi. And I'm having a hard time feeling like I have a lot of confidence in this right now. I like the fact that Joe Girardi, I feel like, will know how to talk to big time players, and I feel like we need that with having a Bryce Harper on the team. Having somebody hold him to a higher standard, a higher level, if you will. But I don't really know if they've made enough moves because we're almost like the Angels East, if you will. The starting lineup, the starting rotation, the bullpen, those are our biggest issues. The team we put out on the field, I feel like is a pretty good team. We have some holes. Maybe we could use an extra outfielder, but our infield's decent. I really hate losing Cesar to the Indians. That really hurts for me. I feel like he was a great player for this team and he had really good gel. It's gonna hurt me to watch him do big things with the Indians, which I feel like he'll do pretty quickly.
It seems like everybody that leaves the Phillies goes on to be a much better performer, let's say, a la Carlos Santana last year. I mean, the guy comes to Philly on a huge contract. You think it's a great signing. He's gonna be Slam Tana, and then he comes in and lays an egg, and then leaves and has probably one of his best seasons back in Cleveland. I mean, Cleveland seemed to be the elixir that he needed to get back to his former self, and I'm happy for him. But I'm tired of, as a Phillies fan, always being in this position of watching our players go on to another team and succeeding more than what they did in Philly.
Not even just with the Phillies. I mean, you get that with the Flyers, you get that with the Eagles, you get that with tons of other of the Philly franchises, and it's so frustrating. And as a Philly fan, you get like that's always been a saying growing up is you watch these people leave and do big things in other places, and it's like, why couldn't they have done that here?
Right.
And I understand that it's a tough environment in which to play. I get that because nobody wants to hear you suck, you know, but in the same respect, if you can pull it off in that environment, you will be a legend forever.
Look up John Kruk's speech from his Phillies Wall of Fame.
Yes, 100% agree.
I mean, if you didn't succeed in Philly, it's because you didn't have the guts to. Think about that. I mean, it gives me chills just saying it.
Yep.
Because that's I mean, if anybody's got Philadelphia down, it's John Kruk. Some people may not like him as an announcer. I do. I think he's great. I think he's one of the best things the Phillies have done as far as their announce team. And he just gets Philly. He gets it.
The only thing that I will say is my knock on Kruk for his announcing, and I agree, I love him. He's one of my absolute all-time favorite Phillies ever. Yeah. Every once in a while, he's in a curmudgeon-y mood, man. And I think to myself, you are doing something that so many people would kill to do, and you seem like you could care less that you're there.
But that's what makes him so lovable because he is Philly. Come on, that's
that
Philly
is very
in a nutshell.
Philadelphia. Yeah. Like, if I'm going to waste my time to come here and watch this, you better make it worth my while.
Exactly. Bring me a cheesesteak, bring me a beer, and just let me do my thing.
So, do you feel like that the former Yankees manager Joe Girardi is going to be able to make a difference here with the Philadelphia Phillies?
I got to admit, I'm not. I wasn't over the moon over this. I think a lot of it has to do with his former team and coming from the Yankees. It's almost like as an Eagles fan having somebody come from the Cowboys. It stings a little bit, especially after 2009. Can he be good? Yeah, I think he's got a chance to really pull these guys together. Like you said, if anybody can do it, and he's been in the biggest market there is. New York is obviously the tops when it comes to baseball and the prestige and the glamour of it all, and 27 rings. You hear that all the time, don't you? And I really feel like he's got a chance to do some good things, and I think he's going to bring the right people in. I'm willing to give him a shot. And, he may not have been the glamour hire. I think at the time Joe Madden would have been the
that's who I wanted.
Right. Think back to Charlie Manuel. No, I didn't even know who Charlie Manuel was prior to him coming to the Phillies.
Yeah, that's true. And it was nice seeing Charlie back in the clubhouse last year, to see him come back and be the hitting coach. I know for me, when we went to spring training games, it was really awesome just to see him there. And every time he'd just turn around slightly, the whole crowd would go nuts. So it's
Papa Charlie.
That's right. I hope that things can go well for them for sure. What percentage of you is worried that we might have our own Astro-esque sort of deal that we have to face with him as being our manager? Because he was on doing an interview the other day, I think it was with the Yes Network, and they were asking him about the Astros deal, and he basically said that they had a system in place. He was a part of a system, he said, that was essentially like the Red Sox system of the guy on second base would decode it and then send it into the batter. Now, you and I both said already earlier that we don't have a ton of a problem with that, because if you are smart enough to do it and you're not using a machine to do it, then that's kind of on you. I don't know if I feel comfortable without feeling like there should be some type of zero tolerance policy in place as like the Phillies owner. Like, if I see this at all at any point in time, you are gone.
But don't you think that there's a heightened sensibility, or a heightened sensitivity, I should say, for this right now? You're going to see much more emphasis put on this year because of what we're going through with the Astros and the Red Sox. I think it's going to be more under the microscope.
So that's why I wonder, like, as a Phillies owner, why would you not steer away from that a little bit more, or press harder for Madden or Buck Showalter when those options are out there for you, and wouldn't really have those proposed possibilities of being in some type of scheme to cheat,
Right. But when was his interview where he admitted to this? Was this after he signed?
Yeah. It was afterwards.
So maybe, at that point, too late? Or, is it that well known in baseball that everybody does that, that scheme of, if you can learn it on the field and you can see it on the field and you can dissect it on the field and not use the trash can and not use a machine, maybe it's more prevalent than what you know.
Yeah, no, that's true. Well, I think that'll wrap up our baseball segment. Moving on to football, we got a whole new league this year, and starting off with Vince McMahon's second go-around of the XFL. Now, I know that the first couple weeks you weren't super tuned in. I, for myself, have been I think I've watched almost every game since it started. I have to say, I've been pleasantly surprised. I know a lot of people have talked a lot of stuff on the XFL since it came out, but the one thing that everybody's been able to say from the beginning is it's been better than the AAF was right off the jump, even though it's a lot of the same players.
Right. Right.
I think they made a few very smart moves right off the bat, which was one, Vince McMahon is nowhere to be found. You don't see him on the sidelines. He's not doing the entrances. He's nowhere, which I think is probably the smartest thing that they've done through this whole process.
100% agree.
Next best move that they made was bringing in Andrew Luck's dad to be the commish, to be the guy who'd really go through and try to figure out how to make this a more legit football game, so that we're not dealing with the professional wrestling of football, but we're actually putting out a quality product, but that has more action. And I think that that's a really great idea. I love the thing that to me sticks out the most, and I think the most people have talked about, is the kickoff.
The kickoff is very interesting. The kickoff is safer. You're lining up 5 yards away from the other team, and you can't move until the receiver catches the ball. I think that's a really unique and interesting way to handle kickoffs, and I think it's going to cut down dramatically on injuries. I mean, you're not getting a 70-yard full head of steam start and just barreling into somebody. I mean, these guys in the NFL take some hellacious hits like that, and you couldn't pay me enough to be a punt returner or a kick returner in the NFL, especially if somebody on your team, your teammate, misses a block. Next thing you know, you've got a 250, 280-pound behemoth coming barreling at you, and you've got nothing in front of you.
I really love the system that you see guys now in the last couple of weeks, especially this last week, because we finally had our first kickoff return, was doing the reversals off of the return. And I think that that's super awesome to see where these players and these coaches are starting to take these rules and starting to adapt to them and starting to kind of put new wrinkles in the game. And I think that's super awesome.
I saw that kickoff, and, it's going to come to a point where how much more can you do? So they got that one off. Good for them. They scored a touchdown. It was great. But like in any other league, they're going to adapt. They're going to learn. They're going to get better at it. And it's going to be a jab here and an uppercut here. And, you're going to have people be really ingenious in their play design. I think that's a good part of the XFL. What I don't like about the XFL is you're almost, and it's shame on the NFL because they're not willing to adapt and they're not willing to learn and make these kind of changes. But let's say the NFL were to implement just the tiniest bit of something that the XFL has done. And then that, from an NFL perspective, is going to legitimize the XFL. And it's going to give them that much more, a legitimate foothold and stronghold to say, hey, look, the NFL's taking our ideas now. And so from an NFL backer and lover, for me, looking at the XFL, you're almost taking away the XFL's ability to evolve. Because, like I said, anything that comes out of the XFL, if they try to implement just the smallest part of it, you're going to find out that people are going to say, "Oh, you took that from the XFL because you're in the Stone Age, you're archaic, you're never going to learn." And I think that's actually going to help the XFL grow.
So the second rule that I like the most, I think, from the XFL is the ability to score different types of points after you get the touchdown. So you have the option from the 2, you can go for 1 point, from the 5, you can go for 2 points, and then from the 10, you can go for 3 points. It wasn't really until this last week 3 of the XFL, that you started seeing teams go for 3. It was almost like I don't think anyone had in the first 2 weeks. It's nice to have that little bit of a wrinkle because then it gives you the ability, if you are down, to actually have more chances to come back and get into the game. It's only happened a few times so far from jump, but I really feel like as teams get to have more ability to strategize around this, that you're really going to find that teams are going to go for that more. And I think it's cool. You're not always doing the same thing. You don't, they scored a touchdown, I'm going to go get a sandwich or some chips and I'll come back after the kick. You actually have to stick around and watch it now.
Yeah, that is interesting. and but you have to score to be able to get to those positions, and the 1, the 2, or the 3-point extra. Now this is I'm asking you this because I really haven't paid too much attention, but they've eliminated field goals after the touchdown altogether.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, you can still kick a field goal if you don't score a touchdown, obviously. But other than that, yeah, you're going. It's essentially going for 2 every time if you're equating it to the NFL.
Right.
It's to me, I think it's been a fun product to be able to see. I think people need to be a little more understanding because week 2 was a little rough as far as there was a lot more blowouts. There was a lot less. There was some couple games where people didn't really score a whole lot. And it's like when you have this level of talent, especially the first season, the first iteration of it, you are dealing with guys that maybe have consistency problems.
Right.
So it's going to take a little while for them to kind of figure those things out. You watched Cardale Jones for the DC Defenders through the first 2 weeks, had great performances. And then this week, he couldn't get his head out of his butt. It's interesting to see, like, when these things happen, because rolling into that game, I'm like, man, DC Defenders look like the best team in the league. Like, I don't know who's going to stop them. And then they lay an egg. It's like, it's kind of fun to get a chance to see that, because it's like trying to think to myself as like a power rankings through the first 3 weeks and like, man, who would I put on top? And you're like, well, it's got to be DC going into week 3. And then this happens and you're like, man, the Battlehawks look great this week. There was a lot of different teams that really, I felt, showed up that you didn't feel like were going to coming into the game. So that to me is the fun part of this, is seeing, because these guys only had like 2 months to practice going into the season. It's not like they had an entire offseason, an entire training camp where they were really able to acclimate to being a team. So these guys are learning on the fly, essentially. So I feel like if people give them a little more latitude, you would really find a fun product that they're trying to put out there. Like, another thing I really like, and it's kind of fun to watch, is the whole situation with them interviewing guys on the sidelines, like right after something happens. You're giving them that much more of an opportunity to potentially put their foot in their mouth. And we saw that with Matt McGloin last week with the New York Guardians. I don't think that I've ever seen a situation where things have deteriorated that quickly on a football team, live and for everyone to see.
Now, I didn't see his meltdown, but I did see there was one player that was coming off the field, big white guy. I think he had long hair, and the interviewer asked him the question, and he just drops the F-bomb right on live TV, and that's something that I think they might end up changing, because in the moment, in that moment, it's going to be very hard for people to mute themselves and not cuss and not be who they are and not be amped up and not be that animal. On the field and off the field are 2 different things, and you can't just get somebody in the heat of the moment and not expect them to be themselves.
And I think that that's kind of very telling, because when you have a guy like Matt McGloin that reacts in that particular fashion, if I was an NFL team, I'm not looking at that guy anymore. Like, dude, you just bombed your whole career in one game, essentially.
Right.
Because I already didn't have high hopes that he was going to do much coming in, but I'm like, hey, man, former Eagle, I'd like to see him do well. It'd be cool to see him show out. And the first game, he did great. And I was like, man, he could really go somewhere with this. And then it just imploded. And then they go to interview him at halftime, and he's walking his way back to the locker room, and he's like, we need to change our whole offense, the whole offense. And it's like, bro, maybe just don't play terrible. Like, that would help a lot. And so then this week you end up having like the roller coaster ride of quarterbacks of going in and out between the 3 different guys in their quarterback this week for the Guardians. And it's like, man, it has to be so hard as a coach in this league, because if something doesn't click, you're just rolling until you find something. Like, you're just essentially bottoming out. And that's kind of what happened to them this week, is just they couldn't find an offense to throw out on the field.
Right. And, it speaks to, if you want to say like any kind of quarterback issue in the XFL, I think it's obvious. There's a quarterback issue in the NFL, because you're going from, the elite quarterbacks, and then there's a steep drop off, and that's the NFL. And you go to the XFL where you're getting the NFL's leftovers, so to say. I think you're going to have issues. Now, I know that there's a guy, PJ Walker, I believe he plays for Houston, who's been lighting the league on fire.
He's been ridiculous.
But against what talent?
This guy is right now heads and tails above the entire rest of the league. He alone has scored more touchdowns than entire other teams have scored.
Right.
So, and he's doing Mahomes-esque things with, trying to, with the snap that went over his head the other day, and he got to recover it and then came back. So I love to see these guys get second chances. I think it's going to be tougher for quarterbacks because they have that clause in their contract that essentially they're locked into that contract.
Yep.
But I feel like with this league, wait till next year. When these guys can start picking college players out that want to make money right now, then I think they're going to have a chance to really start seeing that talent level shoot up there and actually do big things.
You think they're going to start? You think it's going to start bleeding the NFL to a degree?
I think it's going to give college players an alternative. Yo, hey, you don't want to go to school? You want to just show up and knock heads every day?
Right.
Then you have a way now to do that. Show up and get paid. You don't have to go to class, and then now you can essentially still get your way into the NFL.
I think it's going to be interesting to watch over the next year or so to see how sustainable the XFL is, and then once they start to, if they start to, or when they start to expand, you're really going to see what that league's made of once they start to do that. And, one thing I was glad to see with the XFL is that they brought football back to St. Louis. That was kind of neat. I did the clip that you sent me of the Battle Hawks, I believe it was. Just seeing, the fans, they were going nuts. That place was probably about 50% full too.
And I think if they were smart, I feel like that's what they would work on doing the most, is having as many like soccer style stadiums as they can find. Because when you watch the games in the soccer, like they had the one the Chargers played in last year, which is essentially like a glorified soccer stadium, they filled that thing. And it actually looks like a legit product on the field. Like you get pumped, man. It's like, oh, this crowd is so into it. But then you watch other games where they'll do like the Tampa Bay Bucks Stadium. Was it Raymond James?
Right.
And like the entire second bowl and third bowl are empty. So it's like that makes you look so illegitimate comparatively to the NFL. It's funny. Just because I'm a gamer, it's one of the things with Madden, they will never let the stands be empty. Whereas if you play like MLB The Show, they actually make it realistic that if your team sucks, like nobody shows up to the games and you have to struggle to make revenue. So in that same realm of football here, I have to ask you, since we're here and it's our first show, with the, I think your and I's probably favorite form of entertainment with the Philadelphia Eagles, what do you think it's going to take for this next year? Because I think for us coming off of that Super Bowl win and then just some disappointing seasons thereafter, I'm kind of curious what it's going to take for us to get back. Our team, I feel like there are so many holes. There are so many places that we need work, that we need to figure things out. I don't know where to move forward from here.
It's a good question because I asked myself the same thing, and you can't point to any one specific location and say that's where we should concentrate, because there's a hole here. You got bad corners. There's a hole here. You need a linebacker. You got, and the offensive line, you got Jason Peters that is possibly going to retire, or he wants to play another year, but, do you hold on to him for another year and let him play? The guy gets injured almost every play, it seems,
There's Malcolm Jenkins, who wants more money.
Exactly. And maybe deservedly so. I mean, the guy signed the contract. He played last year. He played well. He played every snap again. He's not a liability on the field, that's for sure. And I feel like there's just not one specific area that you can say, oh, the Eagles' need is, linebacker, corner, safety. It's pretty much across the board that they need help. Wide receiver. The only places that they don't need help, seemingly, are quarterback and tight end.
Yeah, pretty stacked in those spots.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people last year had a problem with Jim Schwartz and the way that he played defense, or the way that he had his defense come out for him. A lot of people felt like he couldn't make changes to that defense. He couldn't adapt and kind of overcome with the players that he had available to him. Do you feel like it was something to where he just literally had no ammo, or do you feel like it's a situation to where he lacked the ability to overcome and adapt to his changing defensive core?
I think it's a little from column A and a little from column B. I think you're obviously limited by who you have available, and as we all know, they were decimated by injuries last year. But if you look at his stats over the last couple of years, he's really had, I don't know exactly what they are, but in the terms of defense and points given up and, yards allowed and things of that nature, he's got one of the better defenses in the league over the last several years. So I can't fault him too much. Sometimes he drives me crazy, especially with the sticks defense at the end of a game or in the fourth quarter or overtime. Go watch the end of the Titans game that one year where 4th and 17 twice, I think, on that final drive, and they lost because of it, because you couldn't stop them. You couldn't stop them on 4th and 17. It's just that's the stuff that drives me nuts when it comes to Jim Schwartz. But from a coaching perspective, you obviously are limited by what you have, and I think you got a lot out of him last year.
So leading into some more of the problems that I see with the Eagles organization, how do you feel that they have handled the whole situation with Deuce, with having a guy with being your running backs coach who has just done exemplary work with guys like Scott and Miles Sanders, and then you fire your offensive coordinator and you don't immediately give this guy a shot, and then now we hear that he's possibly inquiring about college jobs. So what is going on with the Eagles front office that we're not allowing these guys to promote from within when they're seemingly doing a good job? Is it that you don't want to relinquish Dougie P's role in things, that you don't want to, give up that? Does maybe Deuce have a different overall philosophy for how the offense should run? Maybe. I don't know what's going on with that, but it seems like they're mishandling the situation.
They're totally mishandling it. I mean, Deuce Staley is a hell of a coach. And like you said, with Boston Scott and Miles Sanders, I think in the end what it has to do with is he's a running back, right? Deuce Staley was a running back. He wants to run the ball. He wants to take care of his running backs by running the ball. So you're not necessarily in the West Coast Doug Peterson, Andy Reid style of offense where you're just chucking the ball. So that may be his biggest, the thing that's holding him back the most is just because they feel like he's going to get away from the pass and he's going to make them more of a running team. But Deuce kind of fits that Eric Bieniemy, mold of he keeps getting passed over, and you wonder when he's going to get a shot. And I think when he does get his chance, he's going to be a hell of a coach.
So do you think the NFL has an issue with not giving black head coaches or black coaches more of a chance?
Completely. I mean, it's obvious. You look at the disparity between white coaches, black coaches, and the Rooney Rule, which is kind of a joke anymore. It's just more of a formality. It's like, oh yeah, hey, we interviewed Bieniemy, but we're gonna go with some white guy you've never heard of.
And I feel like it's tough when you have situations like that, because even with the Kaepernick situation, there's so many different ways that you can look at that and so many different ways you could interpret those actions and why certain things happen, even with his tryouts and things that happened recently. So it's really tough because it can be such a hot button topic with those things. But I really do feel like we need to do something, because it sucks that the best guy is not getting the job. And I feel like that's the case. Now, I feel like with Kaepernick, I don't feel like he could be a starting quarterback, but he could be a backup on any team in the entire league.
No doubt. He should be in the league, Barn, without a doubt.
All right. So we talked a little bit about with the Eagles. We talked about their roster. We talked a little bit about management. One of the things that I wanted to mention also is their GM, Joe Douglas, or assistant GM, if you will, going to the Jets. Do you feel like that's going to be something that's going to come back and haunt them? Or do you feel like it's something that we maybe will benefit in the long run? I mean, we've seen guys like Sidney Jones and Avonte Maddox come in and not really do a whole lot through injury and also just not living up to their potential seemingly. Do you think that that's going to be something that maybe will allow for the Eagles to make better choices down the road?
I think you're not going to see a huge decrease. Obviously, if you go back and look at their recent draft history, there's not a lot of home run hitters there. So in the end, I feel like Joe Douglas isn't a huge loss. He was good for a couple picks here and there, but in the end, I feel like you're going to give somebody else that's got maybe a better eye for talent come up, maybe hopefully through the system and be an asset to Howie and Jeffrey and Doug. But I like Joe Douglas. I thought he was good for us. Obviously, we won a Super Bowl with him. But in the end, I don't feel like he's going to be a huge loss.
It'll be interesting to see now that this is going to be his first year with the Jets and having his own draft with the Jets. I'll be interested to see what pieces that he can pull together for that team because they seemingly need a whole lot to get themselves back and running. I mean, with the Le'Veon situation aside, that offensive line is terrible. They've traded away most of their defense, and they're just trying to rebuild at this point. And hopefully, Sam Darnold can do something for them, not having mono this year.
Right. And how many former Eagles or former Baltimore Ravens are going to appear or make their way to the Jets now with the Joe Douglas effect?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So as we move our way into free agency, we have two possible former Dallas Cowboys that are rumored to be in high regard over in the Eagles front office. And, for myself, we talked about this a little bit earlier. That's just one of the things that, whenever you have a person or a manager, anybody come over from a rival team and then go and start to potentially play for your team, there's some mixed emotions that you go through as a fan because you're like, man, in one respect, I would love to take this piece away from them because you can't not say that Amari Cooper with Dak Prescott is not a good team, not a good matchup. Those guys seem to bring good things out of each other for the most part. I think that it would be nice. Do I say that, Amari is likely an upgrade over Nelson Aguilar? Probably. But would I say that I feel that I want another person on this team who could be another diva, who could be another guy that will not show up in that big moment? I think that's the one thing you have to look at with this, because I feel like if you're bringing in Amari Cooper to the Eagles, you are not solving their wide receiver problem at all. You are literally just adding another liability to that wide receiver core. What do you think?
I think he's a great talent when he wants to be. When he wants to play, he's a heck of a ball player. But look at that last 2 games of the season. I mean, where was he? I don't think he had a catch in the one game.
When Dallas needed him the most in the defining game of that last season, where was he? He was on the sideline.
On the sidelines.
They trusted people who were not even their number one wide receiver to come in and win that game, and he sat on the sidelines and watched.
And moped.
Yep. And that's why I don't want him on this team. I don't want guys that are not going to give it, because you know what? He's going to hear that from the fans, and he's going to essentially check out, and then we're going to have the same thing we've had here over and over and over again with guys that come here and choke because they can't handle the crowd.
I'll give you 2 words. Orlando Scandrick.
Ooh, man, that got a little juicy last year, didn't it?
He had he had some pretty big cojones to do what he did last year, and come here and he had that strip sack or the strip in the game against the Jets, and you go from goat outhouse to penthouse or penthouse to outhouse in a matter of weeks, and for what he did last year, it's going to be very difficult for me to accept any more Cowboys coming onto this team.
So I'm glad that you brought that up. So he went on Undisputed with Skip and Shannon and was basically talking about
Skip,
and throwing Carson Wentz under the bus, essentially. And so that's something that, to me, I feel like is going to be interesting, because one of the big talks in the offseason is about what are we going to do, or what are the Eagles going to do, rather, with Alshon Jeffrey? Because there's rumors that a lot of the malcontent that was coming from the locker room was coming from him about all of the, Carson Wentz doesn't know how to lead. A lot of that supposedly was coming from him. So do we need to send him off and trade him out and try to cut our losses at this point and try to see if we can move on? And because this year's draft is supposed to be pretty stacked with wide receivers, or do we need to hold on to that and hope that maybe him and Carson can find some sense of a relationship?
I think you got to hold on to him, and for no other reason than his cap hit. His cap hit, I believe, this year would be $16 million.
Yeah, I thought it was 16 or 17, yeah.
And, for that reason alone, I don't think you're going to see anybody want to take his salary on. I think he's got $26 million left. But how quickly we forget, right? How quickly we forget how great he was and what a big, huge pickup he was before. He's what got us a Super Bowl, part of it.
Yeah, but people only want to remember the drop the year after that.
Right, against the Saints. And to me, a guy like Alshon is what helped put us over the hump. And I don't take that lightly. So I think you hang on to him. I think you give him a shot to redeem himself. I think Josina Anderson has a lot to do with the the rat infestation that we had last year, along with Orlando Scandrick. And I think once you clean that up, I feel like things could change. And I just think you have to keep him.
So last year, Amari Cooper had over 1,000 yards for Dallas. He had 8 touchdowns. So if it was up to you, are you putting that as your 1 and 2 with having Alshon and Amari as your 1 and 2 wide receiver core, or would you yourself, if you're the owner or GM of the Eagles, not going after Cooper in the offseason? Are you going to stick with the draft, or are you going to go with the flashy free agent?
I think you're stuck with staying with the draft. And the reason I say that is, let's go back to Alshon. What's his cap hit again? You're talking 16, 17 million. So if you keep Alshon at that cap hit, you draft a young guy who's going to be what, $400,000 or $500,000, $600,000, whatever the case may be, and you have to hope that you hit a home run on your draft pick. And that's how you can avoid having the cap penalty and also get your production. So you have to really go after a young wide receiver in the draft and hope that you hit a home run with him.
You know, for me last year, I felt like one of the biggest disappointments for me was us not getting Marcus Peters. And I really felt like that was something that, seeing him go to the Ravens and do big things, it was frustrating to me because we've had that lack in our secondary for some time now, and it would have been nice to have a guy in there that is at least competent at his job. So it's tough for me when you see things like that happen, where it's like essentially a not a big name move. Like, they didn't give up the farm to get him. So why weren't we involved in that? Why didn't we have a chance to get somebody like that?
I mean, I'm sure there's reasoning behind it, whether it was his cap hit or, was it a fit? Was it a personality thing? We've heard some things thrown out there before about Marcus Peters and his attitude, and is he a good teammate? Is he a good fit? Is he a cancer, so to say, to a locker room? So maybe that was the reasoning behind them not going after him and pursuing him. But it hurts to see these guys that are good, can play, and then they go, for, a bag of balls, let's say, and then go on to a team like the Ravens that was already stacked and have a good year. It's very, painful to watch.
So to wrap up our Eagles discussion, we've been talking about that secondary. The big other free agent name that's on the market right now in the cornerback realm is Byron Jones. So do you think that he might have what it's take for the Eagles to bring him in and finally shore up their cornerback core? Or do you feel like this is another one of those things where we need to stay away, see about working our way up in the draft and seeing what we can do? Now, I'm going to preface this a little bit because for myself, with the Malcolm Jenkins situation, with the Jason Peters situation, with all of those things, I lean a little bit more on the let's just rip this Band-Aid off now and let's just move this forward. Because I feel like it's been a detriment to our team that we tried to re-rack and go for another Super Bowl right away. I feel like if we had allowed for some of those pieces to fall off and to start to rebuild organically, even though I hate using that term, that I feel like it would have been something that would have allowed for us to come back and be stronger, faster than us trying to patchwork this for the last 2 years and then really just ending up doing much of nothing.
A guy like Byron Jones it's interesting. I would at least kick the tires on him, but I don't think it's a wise choice to sign anybody. The reason being is, how many guys have we seen get signed over the last couple of years? Big name free agents, and they don't play to their contract.
Well, we've had that with Darby to an extent because he can't stay healthy.
Right.
And when he's on the field, he's great. I have no problem with him. I mean, he gets burnt once in a while, but who doesn't? But he hasn't really lived up to the contract.
And I think, Malcolm Jenkins, that guy played to his contract and then some. But I wouldn't give him another contract like that now.
Nope. And that's my thinking. With the situation with Alshon, I would try to see if I can rectify the situation with him if he's amiable to trying to work it out. If he's not, I wouldn't have a problem with getting rid of him. With Malcolm, that would be hard for me to do, but I would at least shop it and see what I could get back from it. And that's the same aspect that we were talking about earlier, is like, as sports fans, as owners, as managers, it's hard to have that Bill Belichick approach to where you don't hold these guys as legends, as more than the regular everyman for doing these great accomplishments. It's what have you done for me lately all of the time. So as hard as it is to see these things happen, I understand. I mean, we all have emotions. We don't want to treat these guys like commodities all the time. They're people. They have feelings. I mean, I felt bad for those guys that were involved in the trade with Mookie that thought they were getting shipped out. And their whole families thought they were moving, and come to find out some of the guys didn't even get traded. So it's tough for me to see that happen. But yet in the same respect, like, I want to see this team get back because I don't want them to squander Carson's career. When's the last time that we've had a talent like that? I think he's even better than Donovan ever was. I think he is a more tooled player than Donovan was. I'll put it that way. I think he has the ability to take us further, but it'll be interesting to see if he can do that with the team that they build around him.
And I think this is now the chance for the Eagles to do that. Pull the Band-Aid off. Get rid of the guys that aren't Carson guys and build around him. This is now going to be like watching what happened in Seattle with Russell Wilson and seeing, the Legion of Boom disappear. And now it's Russell's team. That is Russell Wilson's team, bar none. Without a doubt, everybody follows his lead. And that's what we need to have happen here. It's got to be Carson's team. No ends, ifs, or buts about it. And we've all got to buy into Carson, and that's the only way it's going to happen. And they have to build around him and give him the tools to make that happen.
Last question. And I already know where you're going to go with this, but I've had so many people talk to me about this. I feel like it's be good to get your opinion on it on air, recorded. Carson Wentz or Nick Foles? You want me to go first?
Go ahead.
Carson Wentz all day long. I will always love St. Nick. To me, him taking us to the promised land will forever make him one of my favorite Eagles. But we all knew what kind of player he was. We all knew the ceiling in which that he had. And I think with Wentz, you're looking at someone who could be arguably a much, much, much higher ceiling, a much, much more competent ceiling. I love Nick Foles. I think he's an amazing person, super awesome guy. Never heard a bad thing about him. But unfortunately, I would have never expected him to take us back and to do it again. Those pieces had to fall as they did exactly that way for that to happen.
A good friend of ours uses the phrase about getting into the playoffs and getting hot. Just get into the playoffs and get hot, and anything can happen. And I think 2017, the Eagles caught lightning in a bottle, and Carson got them there, and Nick Foles finished the job. And like you said, I love Foles. I mean, he's, I'll forever remember that game. I think the Eagles did the right thing by getting, letting him go. He got paid, and we all know what Foles was in St. Louis. He was not a good quarterback.
I think you could argue that was Jeff Fisher a bit, but still, I agree. I don't think that. I mean, seeing what he's done now with Jacksonville, I don't think there's any question.
Right.
Like, he fit the Eagles system. He was that system's quarterback.
He was the perfect fit at the perfect time to do the perfect game, and it took a damn near perfect game in the Super Bowl against Tom Brady for us to bring that championship home. So I'm with you. I love Nick, Saint Nick. But Carson's the right answer.
Absolutely. So I want to thank you, Ralph, again for coming in. We're doing another episode again, hopefully next week, so we want to make sure everybody tunes in. If you want to keep in touch with the show, we're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on SoundCloud. We are all over the place, so definitely make sure that you check it out. Spread the word, tell your friends. I want to thank everybody for tuning in again. This has been Brandon, and for Ralph, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your night.
It's my turn. You told me it was my turn.
You can talk all that you want to, yell and scream. You lost.
It is my turn.
You lost the game. Take as long as you want. You're still lost.